Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Caroline Morgan was born into wealth, the only daughter of the late magnate Sir Alfred Morgan, founder of the Morgan Group, one of London's largest investment conglomerates. Her world was carved in marble and gold, yet her heart longed for something pure, something untouched by wealth's pretense. When she first met Richard Hale, he wasn't the powerful man he later pretended to be. He was a humble security officer stationed at her company's headquarters. His dark brown eyes, his polite tone, and his air of gratitude caught her heart off guard. Caroline had met men who flaunted riches, but Richard's humility felt like air in a suffocating room of elites. Against the advice of her friends and board members, she pursued him. Their love blossomed in quiet parks and street cafes far away from her glass-towered world. But while Caroline was seeing sincerity, Richard was seeing opportunity. He couldn't believe how lucky he was, one night of charm, and he had caught the attention of a billionaire heiress. Behind his gentle smiles was ambition sharpened like a blade. Caroline introduced him into her world, her family estate, her board, her life, and he played his role with flawless precision. The staff whispered, the media sneered, yet she married him anyway. In her eyes, she found love in the unlikeliest place. In his, he had found the key to the vault. Marriage should have been a safe harbor, but for Caroline, it slowly became a gilded prison. Richard began to change after the wedding, no longer the soft-spoken man who listened, but one who demanded. He wanted her credit cards, her investments, her signatures on papers she barely understood. Each time she hesitated, he twisted her hesitation into guilt. "You don't trust me," he'd say, his voice carrying mock hurt. "You only love your money." Caroline, eager to keep her marriage alive, signed almost everything he pushed before her. Her board noticed her absence. Her auditors sent warnings, but she silenced them all. Love, she told herself, required sacrifice. Richard's real love was his mistress, Angela Frost, a sharp-tongued beauty from Manchester who had once worked as a personal assistant in Morgan Group. To her, he confessed his plan like a dark lover's secret. He would drain Caroline's fortune, gain control of her shares, and walk away a free man. Angela laughed, kissed him, and called him brilliant. Their affair became bold. They dined in expensive restaurants using Caroline's money. The tabloids caught glimpses. Yet Richard always blamed doctor photos and jealous rivals. Caroline, ever trusting, believed him. The cracks began to widen. Richard started demanding millions under pretense of new investments. When Caroline questioned his plans, he'd explode, calling her cold, accusing her of not believing in their future. "If you loved me, you'd support me," he hissed one night, slamming the study door so hard the chandelier rattled. Her eyes filled with tears. Love, she thought, shouldn't hurt like this. Yet she couldn't bring herself to give up on him. She still saw the man who once walked her home in the rain, not realizing that version of Richard was long gone. Her anxiety grew as her legal team raised red flags, bank transfers, forged approvals, missing funds. She began losing sleep, her health faltering under the stress of proving her love. She skipped meetings, missed lunches, and one morning, while rushing to a business appointment, she sat behind the wheel, her mind a storm. Richard's words echoed in her head. "You don't care about me. You're selfish. You're just like your father, controlling." Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. A sharp turn, a flash of light, and the world spun into darkness. Caroline's luxury sedan crashed against the steel barriers of a bridge outside Westminster. Witnesses screamed as the vehicle burst into smoke. For hours, her fate was uncertain. Her name dominated every headline. Billionaire heiress in critical condition. In the hospital, Richard played the grieving husband perfectly. Cameras caught him holding her hand, shedding crocodile tears. Behind the curtains, he was already calling Angela, his voice low and thrilled. "She's not dead," he said, "but she's lost her memory. She doesn't even know her name." Angela gasped and laughed. "That's even better," she whispered. When Caroline finally woke up, the world was blank. She stared at white walls and asked the nurse who she was. Her memory was a void, and Richard couldn't have been happier. Within days, he began transferring her funds. Using her forgotten signature and old authorizations, he moved millions from her accounts. He staged compassion while plotting betrayal, visiting her with false affection. He told her lies about her life, that she'd been unfaithful, that she begged for divorce, that she had no family left. Confused and fragile, Caroline believed every word. Weeks later, Richard filed for divorce on fabricated grounds. He told the court Caroline was mentally unfit and unfaithful, producing false psychiatric reports. By the time she was discharged, the papers were signed and her wealth gone. Angela moved into Caroline's mansion, flaunting diamonds and designer gowns, while Richard's accounts overflowed. Caroline was handed a small check and sent away from her own home with nothing but a suitcase. The world believed she fled in shame. Richard threw a private celebration that night, champagne, laughter, and Angela dancing in her gown. Caroline, meanwhile, wandered the streets of London like a ghost. Her memory flickered, but never held steady. She slept near train stations, begged for food, and stared blankly at reflections she didn't recognize. At times, she'd catch a name Morgan, but it vanished before it meant anything. People whispered she was mad, yet fate was not finished with her. One cold evening, drenched by rain, she collapsed outside a small bakery in Southwark, and that was where Nathan Cole found her. Nathan Cole was no billionaire, just an honest mechanic trying to survive London's endless bills. He found Caroline shivering under the streetlight, her clothes torn, her eyes distant. Something about her face struck him, a quiet grace that didn't belong to the streets. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his van and drove her home. His house was small but warm. He gave her soup and blankets, watching as she ate slowly, her trembling hands gripping the spoon. When he asked her name, she only whispered, I don't remember. Over the weeks, Nathan helped her heal. He took her to clinics, read books to her, encouraged her to write down every memory that surfaced. He called her Grace, the name she had chosen temporarily. Something in her eyes told him she came from a world much higher than his, but he never asked for more than she could give. In his humble home, she felt safe for the first time in years. Though she had forgotten her past, she could sense she was once someone important. Nathan, kind and patient, became the anchor she never knew she needed. As months passed, fragments of memory began to surface. A name scribbled on a piece of newspaper, Morgan Group, made her pause one morning. That name, she murmured, her brow furrowed. Nathan leaned forward. Does it mean something? She shook her head, but felt her pulse quicken. Nights were restless. Dreams flooded with images, boardrooms, luxury cars, a man's laughter, a woman's sneer. She'd wake up sweating, clutching the blanket, feeling trapped by something she couldn't name. Nathan started researching the name Morgan Group quietly, hoping to help. When he found out it belonged to a multi-billion-pound enterprise, he was stunned. He showed her articles, photos of Caroline Morgan, the missing heiress who vanished after a mysterious divorce. Caroline froze. The face in the photo was hers. Her eyes widened, tears welling. That's me, she whispered. Nathan's hand trembled as he reached for hers. Then we know where to start. Her memory was returning, and with it, a storm of betrayal waiting to be unleashed. Pieces began to fit together. Her handwriting, her speech, the way she instinctively handled documents Nathan showed her. Caroline Morgan was slowly returning. Nathan guided her to the city again, standing with her outside the skyscraper bearing her name, the Morgan Group Tower. She stared at it, heart pounding, memories flashing, meetings, laughter, and Richard's deceitful smile. Everything came rushing back like a tidal wave. The pain, the humiliation, the accident, all of it resurfaced in an instant. She clutched Nathan's arm, tears streaming. He did this to me, she whispered. Nathan wanted to storm inside, but Caroline stopped him. No, she said, voice trembling but fierce. I need proof. If I walk in there now, I'm just a mad woman off the street. I'll come back as who I was the owner. That night, she planned carefully. She gathered hospital records, dug up legal documents, traced bank accounts under false names. Nathan became her silent partner, her strength in the shadows. For the first time, she wasn't just a victim. She was preparing for her reckoning. Caroline's intelligence returned in full force. She contacted old board members discreetly under a new alias, gaining access to internal ledgers. Every document led back to one name, Richard Hale. He had forged her authorizations and transferred entire properties into his name. She collected every piece of evidence, from bank statements to corporate seals. The betrayal cut deep, but now it fueled her determination. Nathan watched her transform from the quiet woman he rescued into a fierce executive reclaiming her empire. Meanwhile, Richard and Angela lived in luxury, utterly unaware. The Morgan Group was planning its grand Thanksgiving Gala, an annual event hosted by Richard as the acting CEO. Invitations flooded London's elite. When Caroline saw the announcement, a bitter smile curved her lips. "Perfect," she said. "Let the celebration begin." That night, she looked in the mirror of Nathan's small flat, not as a broken woman, but as a storm about to rise. The night of the Morgan Group Thanksgiving Gala shimmered with wealth and arrogance. The ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers as London's elite gathered to toast Richard Hale's leadership. Angela glittered beside him in a gold gown, her laughter echoing through the hall. Cameras flashed, music soared, but their glory was about to crumble. Unnoticed, a woman in a simple black dress entered the hall. Her eyes, sharp as glass, scanned the room. It was Caroline Morgan, reborn. She waited until Richard began his speech, raising a glass to his beloved company. Then she stepped forward. "You mean my company?" Her voice rang through the microphone she'd taken from a stunned waiter. The hall fell silent. Heads turned. Richard froze, the color draining from his face. Caroline pulled out files and projected bank records onto the giant screen behind him. Every forged signature, every stolen account. "You stole everything from me, Richard," she said coldly. "But you couldn't steal justice." The police, already briefed by her legal team, moved in. Angela's hand slipped from Richard's arm as cameras clicked furiously. The man who had once mocked her was now cornered, trembling. The police swarmed the ballroom. Guests gasped, their whispers rising into chaos. Richard tried to protest, shouting that it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence spoke louder than any words. Officers placed him in handcuffs as cameras flashed, capturing the very image he had feared his entire life. Humiliation. Angela slowly backed away, realizing her empire deceit was collapsing too. She tried to hide behind the crowd, but reporters recognized her immediately. Caroline stood still, her expression unreadable as she watched them crumble. It was poetic justice. Richard called her name as he was dragged away, his voice breaking. "Caroline, please. I loved you." She turned her gaze toward him, her tone icy yet calm. "You loved what I had, not who I was." With that, she walked away from the podium. The audience, once skeptical of her disappearance, now applauded. The woman who had been betrayed, stripped of everything, and left for dead was now standing tall, reclaiming her name, her power, and her dignity. Angela Frost became the next casualty of truth. As investigators uncovered her involvement, her lavish life vanished overnight. The media tore her apart. Stories of her affair, her manipulations, and her shameless display of wealth made headlines across the UK. Caroline's lawyers demanded restitution for the stolen assets, and Angela, cornered by evidence, confessed that she had helped Richard falsify signatures. Her confession sealed his fate. With her reputation destroyed, Angela fled London. Once she had dined with millionaires. Now, she hid in a cheap hotel in Manchester, haunted by regret. Every luxury she flaunted had turned to dust. Meanwhile, Caroline refused to celebrate her downfall. "Let her live with what she's done," she told Nathan. "That will be her punishment." Nathan watched her with quiet admiration. She was no longer the fragile woman he had rescued. She was something far greater, reborn through fire and betrayal. Caroline's reinstatement as CEO of Morgan Group made national headlines. The boardroom erupted in standing ovation the morning she walked in, dressed in an elegant navy suit, her head held high. Gone was the timid heiress. In her place stood a powerful woman forged by suffering and resilience. The same men who once doubted her now bowed in respect. She addressed them calmly, outlining her plans to restore the company's integrity and ensure such betrayal would never happen again. When she returned to her father's old office, memories flooded back. Childhood laughter, dreams of building something meaningful, and the naive love that once blinded her. She stood by the window overlooking London's skyline and whispered to herself, "I'm home." Nathan waited quietly outside, unsure if he should enter, until she turned and smiled. "You brought me back to myself, Nathan," she said softly. "Now, let's rebuild what they tried to destroy." Richard's trial became the most talked about case of the year. The courtroom was packed. Media, executives, and curious citizens gathered to witness the downfall of the man who stole from Britain's most powerful heiress. Caroline sat calmly in the front row, flanked by her legal team and Nathan. Richard's once proud face was pale and gaunt. He tried to smile at her, hoping for pity, but she looked through him like glass. During cross-examination, evidence of his greed unfolded mercilessly. Forged documents, secret transfers, fake medical reports, even video evidence of his meetings with Angela. His defense crumbled. When the judge finally read the verdict, guilty on all counts of fraud and coercion, Richard bowed his head, defeated. Caroline closed her eyes in quiet relief. The world had finally heard her side. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. Richard was sentenced to prison, and his once luxurious life evaporated. Angela refused to visit him, leaving him to rot behind cold bars. In the quiet of his cell, he replayed every memory, her kindness, her laughter, the accident, and the moment she returned like a ghost from his nightmares. He realized too late that the woman he destroyed was the only one who had ever truly cared. Regret ate at him like poison. Outside, Caroline made sure every stolen penny was returned to the company and the charities he had defrauded. She didn't seek his apology. She sought closure. Nathan was by her side, helping with every document, every late-night plan. He had no wealth to offer, yet his loyalty outweighed all fortunes. Caroline often looked at him and thought how ironic it was that the man who had nothing gave her everything she'd lost: peace, warmth, and trust. Months passed, and Caroline began to heal. She traveled with Nathan to the countryside, far from London's chaos. There, amid the green hills and quiet sunsets, she rediscovered the simplicity of life: laughter, cooking, long walks, and the comfort of someone who didn't want a fortune. Nathan, humble yet wise, became her confidant. She would sit by the fireplace, listening to his soft-spoken dreams, realizing that true love wasn't in grand gestures but in quiet loyalty. For the first time in years, she smiled without pretending. Nathan often said, "You were born a queen, but you shine brighter when you're just Caroline." She laughed each time, her heart slowly mending. The scars of betrayal didn't fade, but they no longer defined her. She had faced destruction and rebuilt herself from the ashes. One evening, Caroline received a letter from prison from Richard. She stared at it for hours before opening it. His handwriting trembled across the paper. He apologized, admitting his greed, his lies, and his foolishness. He confessed that no amount of money could replace the peace she had given him once. "I was blind," he wrote. "Now, in darkness, I finally see." Caroline's hands trembled as she read. Nathan found her in tears, unsure if they were pain or forgiveness. "I don't hate him anymore," she said softly. "He destroyed my life, but he gave me the strength to rebuild it." Nathan nodded. "That's because you're stronger than what they tried to make you." She folded the letter and placed it in her drawer. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freedom. Under Caroline's leadership, the Morgan Group transformed. She launched new projects dedicated to helping struggling entrepreneurs and women who lost everything to deceit. She built shelters, created educational funds, and expanded across Europe. Nathan, now her closest advisor, watched her empire grow, but this time built on compassion, not greed. The press dubbed her the Iron Heart of London. One day, during a press conference, a reporter asked, "Miss Morgan, what motivated this change?" Caroline smiled gently. "Because I learned that money without conscience is an empty victory. I lost everything once, and in that loss, I found purpose." The crowd applauded. She wasn't just reclaiming power. She was rewriting legacy. When Richard was released years later, he was a shadow of the man he used to be. He lived quietly, away from the city, working as a mechanic. Ironically, just as Nathan once did, fate had reversed their roles. One afternoon, he saw a billboard of Caroline's new charity foundation. He smiled faintly, whispering, "You won, Caroline." But deep down, he knew she hadn't fought to win. She had fought to become whole. Meanwhile, Caroline and Nathan's bond deepened. What started as compassion had become something unspoken yet undeniable. They were two broken souls who healed each other. Love, this time, wasn't rushed or demanded. It was earned. The Morgan Group's annual gala arrived again, but this time, not as a symbol of arrogance, but gratitude. Caroline stood at the podium beside Nathan, thanking her staff, her board, and the man who stood quietly at her side. This company once nearly destroyed me, she said, her voice strong yet tender. But through pain, I learned what true wealth means: kindness, honesty, and love. The crowd erupted in applause. After the event, she walked with Nathan onto the terrace overlooking the Thames. The night was calm, the city lights reflecting on the water. He turned to her softly. "What now, Caroline?" She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Now we live, not as victims of the past, but as authors of our future." She took his hand, and together they walked forward, no longer haunted by betrayal, but guided by the strength of love reborn. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.